I am the pastor.
I am the prince.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, The Pastor
and the Prince.
Oh boy, internet, thank you for joining us today. We have a whole lot of things to talk about. But first, I want to do this. I just want to cue up where we're at today. We're getting close to Black History Month. For those of you that are catching this on the initial airing of this particular segment, we're airing this one on Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday. And there was a lot of people that are preparing to do some work. And speaking of work, Lyle, you and we were just talking about something that you introduced to me. And you referred to it as Black people homework. Mm-hmm. Well, as the techie person that I am, I Googled it. Mm-hmm. And I was unable to find what this nebulous concept of Black people homework. So today we're going to take out some time to talk about it.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Black people homework, and we're going to give you an actual definition of Black people homework. Mm-hmm. My definition. This will be the Prince Lyle definition of Black people homework. Mm-hmm. But we've got a few things to talk about before that. We also have what's called our word of the week. That's right, our word of the week. And first of all, since I say of the week, I want to thank all of you who listened to our bonus episode. If you didn't know there was such a thing, make sure that you go back and listen to episode B01. That's right, season 1, episode B01. B as in bonus. That's right. And because there's some things you should be doing by the middle of January based on your goals. And so I'm just going to leave that at that. So that's part of your Black people homework. Go back and check out that podcast, that episode.
Yes, you will enjoy it a lot. So back to our discussion on Black people homework, because you were actually educating me from your perspective on this Black people homework. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information about me. I grew up in the suburbs of Cincinnati, Ohio. The suburbs that I grew up in, my high school in particular, believe it or not, there were not a lot of Black children there. And I'm going to use the term Black children because we did not use the term people of color. When I was coming up, we just said Black people, colored people. Some people may refer to, us or of them as Negro, but they might even use the other word that I don't use at all. So with that, I did not have a lot of, quote, Black people homework in this particular environment. As a matter of fact, our graduating class being 800, it was 13 Blacks. So when I heard you say Black people homework, I was like, oh, that's kind of a new concept to me. What do you mean by that? Let's unravel this.
Well, I actually I came up with a few other things. First of all, I want to set it up saying that my idea of homework, number one, homework is important because it teaches all of us in the classroom setting. It teaches the students as well as the teacher how to set priorities, and so I think one of those things is having homework. It helps us determine how well the lessons are being understood, and we can actually apply that to our everyday life. So as you are raising children in the Black community, as you are raising even those of us that are those of our listeners that are not people of color, we want to find out how well you're getting the lessons. We all want to be better. We all, and especially talking about Martin Luther King and the wonderful accomplishments that he was able to make for our society as a whole, so that we look less at color and look at culture. And I want to talk a little bit more about that, but I just want to stick a pin in that.
Okay, that's good. You're setting up some good foundation here with the homework aspect. It almost reminds me of Back to School, that song. I got to go back to school, back to school. So it sounds like there's some additional. Now I can tell you there was a word that I picked up in college, remedial work. that needs to be done.
Absolutely.
For those of us in the Black community.
Right.
Go
but
ahead.
let me finish. Okay. So homework, I wanted to drive that home, that homework is very important. Homework is not done in the classroom. It's done on your own time. It's done as a part of your playtime even.
Extra.
You have to manage that time to be able to stick that in there, to be able to show, because it's important. So in order for you to show the importance to the teacher, or to, because yourself, you wear two hats. You become your self-teacher and you become your self-student. So you're showing yourself how valuable it really is for you to learn this information. Okay, so homework also teaches all of us how to problem solve, because when you do homework, sometimes you practice. Sometimes you practice the math problems, or you practice certain things, or you go back over a paragraph and say, okay, how can I conjugate the sentence? Let's try to use this word in 3 or 4 sentences and see if I can come up with a complex sentence or a compound sentence.
So let me rephrase what you're saying. We have to demonstrate to the instructor or to ourselves that we understand, or that we've comprehended the material that we either read or that we think we're understanding.
Well, that we understand, comprehend, value, and can apply it to situations.
Oh boy, this is going to be a very interesting talk, because applying it to situations is my problem, because I don't see us applying some of these things that we may have learned. So first of all, let's dive into our word of the week, because it sounds like we didn't do that. And you love these breaks. So I feel a break coming on in a few more minutes. No, it's not ready yet, but it's getting close. So.
I had to look at the clock real fast.
Yes, you did have to look at the clock, and I'm definitely going to keep you clock bound today.
Sir.
All right, let's go ahead. Let's talk about the
word of the week. Word of the week is civil rights. All right, so I'm using the word of the week. I'm using 2 words as almost a phrase of the week.
Not a word of the week.
Okay, it's a caption of the week. It's
but I'll go with word of the week.
Okay, so civil rights. Civil rights is basically one word made of 2 words, one concept.
That's fine.
Okay, so I'll break that down. Let me back up the way we do. I'll back up because I don't want to define a word with a word. So civil
sounds good to me.
Civil, number one, we know it relates to ordinary citizens and their concerns, as opposed to military or ecclesiastical matters. So civil. Nice. So now we're talking about ordinary citizens, right? And then when we talk about the rights of those citizens, we're talking about the moral or legal entitlement. So there is an entitlement. That. You know, there's a generation who think they're always entitled. That's a whole nother show.
That's a whole nother show.
But there is an entitlement that comes with just being human. Okay. So
there's a human right.
Yes. So now your civil right, as an ordinary citizen, you have a right, which is a moral or legal entitlement to have or obtain something, or to act in a certain way. You have the right to act in a certain way. You have the right to obtain certain things.
You have a
civil rights
to learn to read. You have a right to learn to write.
Exactly. That's a part of Black people homework.
I was going to say, you have a right to understand the things that you read or write.
Exactly. Now, let me get back to the word. Let's go back to the word. On that, I got to keep him on focus, y'all.
No, that's fine. That's fine. We have to keep each other on focus, because we actually run out of time.
That's absolutely right.
Because there's so much that comes out of this.
I just want to digress for just 1 second.
Digress.
Somebody was giving me feedback on our other episodes, and they said, you and the pastor are just all over the place. Y'all got to stay focused. I said, but what you don't understand is you're listening to an example of conversations that we have all the time. We're just all over the place. So we're going to try to stay focused to stay on our topic. So let me go back to the word.
Yeah, we're going to go back to the word, but let me just add this when it talks about focus. Every time you mention something that's dealing with education, we find out quickly that that's another show. And I'll give you an example of this really quick. Writing. That's not something that we do in the age that we're living in now. We do more typing than writing.
And cursive writing.
It's
not even taught in the schools anymore. That was actually what I wanted to bring up.
Yeah,
it's not even taught in the schools anymore. I had to bring a couple of English teachers on to help us talk about that. I know a few of them who are very passionate about that.
Yes.
I
would agree.
So civil rights.
Back to our rights. We have the right to learn. We have the right to read. We have the right to do mathematics. Go ahead and continue up that list.
And we have a right to the pursuit of happiness and all of those things, right? So civil rights. All right. So now that we know what civil is, we know what rights are. Let's do civil rights. So civil rights is the right of citizens to political and social freedom and equality. Civil rights guarantees of equal social opportunities, and equal protection. I love that part. Under the law, regardless of race, creed, religion, or other personal characteristics.
That is a wonderful definition of civil rights.
Civil rights.
But you know what? That actually brings us into our right as citizens to take a break.
Yeah, we do have a right to take a break. That's why I love the Sabbath too. Shabbat.
Oh,
gives us a right to take a break.
Now you're about to make me happy. So we're going to take a quick Shabbat.
That's right.
And then we'll be back.
Because we're talking about Martin Luther King and we're talking about Dr. King and Black people's homework.
And Black people homework. And that's some things that we will pick back up on the other side of this Shabbat.
Few would realize that Dr. Martin Luther King had changed the direction of his movement from one of civil rights to one that focused on economic disparity. Harry Belafonte speaks on his last conversation with Dr. King. Midway through the civil rights movement, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. realized that the struggle for integration would ultimately become a struggle for economic rights. I remember the last time we were together at my house shortly before he was murdered. He seemed quite agitated and preoccupied, and I asked him what the problem was. Dr. King stated, "I've come upon something that disturbs me deeply. We have fought long and hard for integration, as I believe we should have, and I know that we will win, but I've come to believe we're integrating into a burning house." It appears Dr. King came to the realization that social integration was causing us to trade our progress in politics and civil rights for our economic stability. In Dr. King's last public speech made in Memphis, Tennessee on April 3, 1968, he asked the locals to boycott the likes of Wonder Bread, Coca-Cola, and to patronize black banks and insurance companies. This would be Dr. King's final request of us. He was assassinated the following day. This is Patrick Sturgis with A World of Black History.
And we're back.
We're back.
You're listening to the Pastor and the Prince podcast. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for listening.
We were talking about civil rights, and I'm so glad that we got a chance to introduce a segment to you called A World of Black History. That was Mr. Patrick Sturgis, and I'm so thankful that he decided to do the research and produce that segment for us.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you so much, Patrick. We certainly appreciate it. So you'll be hearing more about that because it is a good idea for us to not wait until what is prescribed as Black history to talk about Black history. And it's okay. It's our right. It's our right to.
I'm gonna have to create an amen button. Amen.
It's our right to continue to celebrate Black history after it's on the calendar, after the 28th day of the shortest month of the year.
Yeah, well, there's a reason why they selected February as Black History Month. For those of you that have the DVDs of Good Times, I would love for you to watch the episode where Michael Evans speak to Black History Week. You have to realize that show was done in the 60s.
Now, that's a good part of our list of Black people homework. And I'm glad you said that. Because if you watch the sitcom, the old sitcom called Good Times, there are some really interesting cultural educational points in there, and that is the whole point of it. I think it's really less about color when you talk about Black people homework, because Black people homework, number one, I don't look at Black people homework just for Black people. Black people homework is also assigned to people that are not of color, Caucasians and others.
Because those that are Asian,
right? Because
those that are Middle Eastern, whatever ethnicity you are. If you're going to enter the North Americas as a country, it's good to understand the history of the entire culture.
Yeah, yeah. Now, here's the thing, because one of the points that I'd like to make is that I actually heard Don Lemon saying this, that he was really getting exhausted trying to explain why something is racist or why something is inappropriate to say or do to his white friends. And I think it becomes unfair after a while, because you don't want to do your homework. You want black people to give you all the answers. And sometimes black people want black people to give them all the answers. But you need to do your homework.
You should do your homework.
Because that tells me that you value the lesson.
I'll say this.
That tells me that you are learning to problem solve.
You should do your homework, but what we've learned and what we've observed is the flip side.
Yeah.
What we've seen is we have a lot of lazy people in this information age.
Yes.
And I'm going to be good, because I can talk about that in just a few moments, but go ahead. You were saying...
Yeah, well, okay. So I introduced the idea of culture versus color.
Yes.
And when you talk about racism, when you talk about color, you talk about all those things that actually induce our idea of black people homework. I want to say that the color of your skin have nothing to do with who you are. It's where we live. It's who raised us, our family traditions, our geography. There's so many things that do have to do with the color of your skin, but the things that are inside of us are the content, as Martin Luther King said. Dr. Martin Luther King,
the content of your character.
Content of your character.
There you go.
So what we want to focus on is not, as a society and as a world, we'd love to see the focus not on the color of your skin, but on culture, being able to observe culture. So when a person says, I'm sorry, I'm not racist, I don't even see color, that's inappropriate, because what you're telling me is that I'm invisible to you. I'm a black man. So if you don't see color, you don't see me. And that's not a good feeling. And so what I'm saying is sometimes I think we should focus on culture, because when you focus on culture, you can embrace culture and learn other people's culture.
Now, when you said that actually took me to a book that if I can use the term, an OG, but it was actually my apostle. He was the one that introduced me to the book.
What does OG stand for?
I believe it stands for Old Gangster.
Yeah, gangster.
So generally what will happen is anyone that's older, the younger people will refer to the older as an OG, which I totally I totally understand is their way of giving deference.
It's a term of endearment too.
They're giving deference to those that are aged, if you will. But let me mention this. There was a book that was mentioned to me that I needed to take a look at and just to read. And the name of the book was called The Spook That Sat by the Door.
Okay.
Yes. And when you mentioned the invisible part of individuals, my mind went directly to that book, The Spook That Sat by the Door, because I'm sure they probably looked at him as an invisible man, because he's sitting there most likely as a butler during a time period where we didn't really matter. We were just servants. We were, hey, Charlie, go get this. Hey, boy, go get that. We were seen more as servants and not necessarily as literary giants that may be able to conjugate a verb, etc. So
yeah,
that took me there. Go ahead.
That's really interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. I was talking about color, and I wanted to mention one other thing is that colors carry deep meanings in them. What
do you mean by that? Colors carry deep meanings.
Because
give us a brief on that.
There are some colors that really correlate with where I was raised. Like I was saying, colors have to do with family traditions. It have to do with geography. It has to do with who raised us and so forth. So in every culture, there are different meanings of color. Okay. For instance, for Eastern, Middle Eastern, Indian, and African cultures, there are stark differences in the symbolisms of color within their cultures, is what I'm saying. Within their cultures. For instance, some cultures where white represents purity, there are other cultures where white represents death.
Yes.
It's the same as the difference between animals.
So let's back that up. White representing death.
Mm-hmm.
What I've learned from my friends that are in Asia, I believe that is the case for them.
Yeah.
White is one of those colors that represents not something that it represents for us. So I do understand that. And I've also seen that if you go toward the Middle East, and I'm going to say the Indian Middle East, there is that dichotomy between the lighter version of the Indians versus the darker version of the Indians, depending on where they're at in the social caste system, if you will. I've also noted that with my friends that are from Africa. You have some that are from, we'll just call it South Africa, that might be a much lighter version than those that are from West or East, parts of Africa. Will depend on, your shade of color that you are. And I don't know if that's what you're referring to. So I wanted you to dive into that more.
Well, that's what I mean is that depending on where you are, the symbolism of color can mean something different. So what we want to do is when we talk about skin, skin should never come into the play of understanding other than understanding where you came from how often you were in the sun or where's your geography or whatever, that kind of thing, but not to determine who you are and what your activities are even in police training. So wait, let me say this.
No, go ahead.
Even in police training, and even some of the algorithms of software and technology that was used in law enforcement, they found out that there are darker people that are recognized on the software that are considered criminals or people who should be targeted or people who are dangerous versus those that are lighter. Wow. And so with saying that, wait, I know that's a lot. But in saying that, I'm driving home that it is important for us to pull the focus off of the color of the skin and pull the focus on understanding the culture behind, because there's a culture in every neighborhood, there's a culture in the suburbs, there's a culture in so forth and so on. So color versus culture leads us to the Black people homework, because if you want to understand my culture and my subculture, it is better for you to understand that than to try to understand me because of the color of my skin.
And so that we don't get wrapped up in the color of your skin, number one, you said two things. Number one, we'll have to have another podcast session with the algorithms that's happening with artificial intelligence and facial recognition, and how it's failing for those of us that are Black.
Yeah,
so that's number one.
Absolutely.
Number two, I was going to ask you about something that was known in the entertainment industry. They referred to it as the paper bag test. If you're lighter than the paper bag, then hey, we can get you this type of job. If you come in darker on the paper bag, you'll get that type of job. Wow. But for those of you that are interested in the quote paper bag, this is going to go back to what the Prince mentioned as far as Black people homework. That would be some homework that you can do to find out if that was something that is true. Now, I wanted to take you back because you kept mentioning Black people homework, and I wanted to talk about something specific because as a computer person, we don't get the opportunity to deal in things that are that abstract. We almost have to program to specifics. So when we start specifically talking about homework, are you talking about Black people homework? Go find out more about Dr. Martin Luther King. Go find out more about Malcolm X. Go find out more about Thurgood Marshall. Or are you saying, hey, we should maybe look at some of the unsung heroes of the Black community that we need to be looking at?
Yes.
What do you mean when you say?
I mean all of that, because number one, you have to have the foundation. So it is finding about those people who you already heard about, but it's also using that to find out, well, who were because you can use that in your research to kind of branch out into other things. So even though you know about Martin Luther King, and before we go to this break, before you know about now that you know about Martin Luther King, why not find out who were the other characters that were marching with him? And
well, so what are some of the other names? Give me some of the other names that you know about.
Number one, Harriet Tubman.
Okay, we know about her because of the movie.
James Baldwin, and I've got a quote. I've got a really good quote from him too. We'll do that. that. W.E.B. Du Bois.
Oh,
George
you said
Washington-
Dubois versus Dubose.
No, it's not Dubose. It's not Dubose. Dubose is actually spelled D-U-B-O-S-E. This is spelled D-U-B-O-I-S. Dubois.
Dubois.
So the S is silent. That's right.
Love it.
That's right. That's right.
Love it.
Now,
Keep going. More
George
names.
Washington Carver.
We know about him because of Peanuts, right?
Yeah, but there's
There's
all
more
kind of other things that he's done.
goes
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
Peanuts,
and
'cause-
even people and here's where you can start your homework.
Mm-hmm.
Start in the industry where you work and find out
Nice.
what blacks were involved in your industry.
So wait, in your industry, it sounds like you were more on the entertainment side.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
In entertainment, what were some of the?
I'm not gonna give them that, but there's Lena Horne and there's Mahalia Jackson, but that's the black people homework, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what about The Color Purple?
Well, the Color Purple. Yeah, you could put that in my industry too. That's film, and
Because that's film.
I did two movies.
Okay, I was
Shameless
gonna
plug.
say you got to do it. Let's do the shameless
Yeah,
plug.
yeah, yeah.
What were
So-
the movies that you were involved with?
Oh, I did Disney's Princess and the Frog.
Princess and the
and
Frog.
Kevin Costner's Black and White.
Black and white.
Yes,
Okay, Princess
yes.
and the Frog. Wasn't that the first Disney movie that they did
a
with
black
the
princess.
black leading
Yes.
lady as the princess?
Princess Tiana.
Oh,
that's right.
I
And
love
she was loosely based on her character was loosely based on a very popular chef. This is another piece of black history. Her name was Leah Chase. She just passed away in her 90s, just recently, a couple of years ago, and they're looking to name one of the most famous areas in New Orleans after her.
After her. I think that's appropriate. That
so
is appropriate.
that was loosely based on her life as a kid, and she founded Dookie Chase's restaurant, which is one of the restaurants where all the presidents have come to New Orleans and eaten there. Some of the major
So
icons
you've given
of
me
the
the
world.
entertainment part.
Yes.
You've given me movies. What about music? What do you know on the music side?
On the
Because
music
I believe
side,
you're in music
yeah,
as well.
That's right. That's right. I've been in music since I was 5 years old. Professionally since
Interesting.
Yeah, professionally since
Since at least 13 or 16.
Yes,
Legally 16.
Legally 16. Yes. But
I knew you were gonna
but
say
of course, there's, like I said, Lena Horne, Mahalia Jackson. There's also Louis Armstrong. There and also I have to mention Aretha Franklin because it ties into
Nice.
us talking about civil rights. There were a lot of artists who actually funded a lot of the expenses of civil rights. Mahalia Jackson was there, and she helped her friend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Tell him about the dream, Martin.
Exactly. Tell him about the dream, Martin. She was the one who influenced him to use that speech on the March on Washington. And here's the thing I want to give to Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul.
Queen of Soul.
Aretha Franklin actually funded a lot of the civil rights movements. She gave them money for the expenses that they had to do. And a lot of people didn't know that. They came to her concerts, and there were people of all walks of life, all color, all creeds, all religions, and they didn't know that some of the money that she was making, she was funneling it to
the movement.
To the movement.
So
That's right.
Aretha
That's right.
was buying buses.
Like Mrs. Thomas.
Like Mrs. Thomas. There
Y'all
you
gotta
go.
go back and listen
you gotta
to
go
the
back and listen to that.
insurrection
So
episode. I think that was episode number 2.
Yes.
Where we tell you about that.
we have to take our
All right.
final break.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we will be back after
We'll give you some
this
more.
message.
Yes. And we're back.
We're back.
I am the Prince.
I am the pastor.
That's right. Pastor Tim Hamner is who you're listening to. That's who the pastor is.
And Prince Lyle is who you're listening to over to the side of me here.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, by the way, one of our platforms that we release our podcast on, as you're probably listening to, podcast.yahogo.org. That's right. And it's spelled YAHOGO.org. That's right. And you can also email us, podcast@yahogo.org. And you can follow me on all social media. I'm on there as Prince Lyle. You can find me on everything, including Grammy Pro.
Yeah, and I'm not on any of them. So no, I shouldn't say that.
He's on some things. You can find
I'm
him.
on some things, but I
find him
don't
at church.
reply. There you go.
You
That's the best place you can find me.
Yahweh's House of God.
Yahweh's House of God.
Shout out to Yahweh's House of God
House of
congregation
God
in
1
Oakland,
p.m.
Oakland, California, or online, yahogo.org, every Saturday, 1 p.m. Central.
1 p.m. Pacific.
Sorry.
Standard. Yeah, we're in
I kind of went back home for a second.
Went back home there for
Pacific Standard Time. Okay, listen. We were talking because I'd like to
Black
give
people
tribute.
homework. We need
Black
to
people homework.
wrap it up.
Before we do that, I want to mention some very significant things about Martin Luther King. Dr. Martin Luther King, number one, he was an American Baptist minister and activist. That's right. He was a minister and an activist.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you keep hearing Dr. Martin Luther King. You keep hearing Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. He was a Baptist minister who became the most visible spokesperson, the most visible spokesman and leader in the civil rights, the American civil rights movement from 1955 until his assassination in 1968. He was born on January 15th, but it became national law that we would give a holiday to him on every third Monday, no matter what date that fell in January. So that's what we celebrate, even when this podcast is released, right? So the 17th of the year 2022, we celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Day, but his actual birthday is January 15th. Here's a few other things to help you with your Black people homework. Martin Luther King Jr. is known for his contributions to the American civil rights movement in the 1960s, and this is how he helped to change the entire world. His most famous work in his I Have a Dream speech. It was delivered in 1963, and he spoke of his dream of a United States that's void of segregation and racism. Now, here's how he changed society in the entire world. He was largely responsible for the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The Civil Rights Act banned discrimination in the workforce, so some of us are enjoying that. I'm almost done.
And you know what? We're going to have to leave some on the table so that they can go back and find out with their black, because this is the Black people home that we're talking about.
Go back and find out what the voting rights was.
We're trying to squeeze all of this into a 30-minute segment, and guess what? We're out of time. And I'm going to share something with you that Mr. Baldwin says, and this is what Mr. Baldwin says. I can't believe what you say because I see what you do. Ooh. You went over, and that's why preachers get a bad rap when they say, we're going to close, and then they got 3 closes, and I couldn't even get my podcasting partner here to close on time.
Well, while we're closing,
we're going to close.
Dr. Martin Luther King said, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that.
Only light can do that. So now that we have the light, we're going to turn the lights out on this particular podcast. Friends, enjoyed it. You have some homework to do. We've shared some things. We've primed the pump. We want you to go back and to begin to maybe extend the discussion a little bit more along with us. Maybe you want to share some things with us that we did not share, and maybe we can create another podcast during the month of February. We have the month of February throughout, the rest of the year, as the Prince had mentioned, that Black people homework is not something that starts now. It is something that's year round.
And it's also not just to Black people.
It's not just to Black people. It's those that want to find out about the Black experience in America, so that you can understand maybe why we're so frustrated, why we're so irritated, why we do some of the things that we do.
And you might be able to understand why they don't necessarily like us, but they like our culture and what we have to bring to the table.
See why soul food is so soulful. With that, I am the pastor.
I am the Prince.
You are listening to the Prince and
the Pastor
podcast.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.